Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this afternoon's licensing subcommittee. At this point of proceedings, I would like to invite members to elect a chair, following which I will read out some protocols which you will all be familiar with, but for the sake of this meeting, I will read them out to ensure that it runs smoothly. Can I invite members to elect a chair at this point, please?
Yeah, I'd like to propose Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much.
Right, can I just say, could you only speak, please, when invited to do so by Councillor Bell, who has just been elected the chair? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking, apart from the chair, who does not need to mute their mic at any stage. And this is to ensure the meeting is conducted effectively. When speaking, please be succinct and do not exceed the allocated timeframes. If you're referring to a specific page or picture in a report, please refer to it specifically. If you are having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting, and you will hopefully receive assistance. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. And once all applications have been considered, any remaining parties will be asked to log out of the hearing. Please do so promptly so that councillors will have the opportunity to deliberate and make a decision on each application. There's only one application today, so on the application that has been heard, and each party will be notified of the decision within 5 working days. At this point, I will hand over to Councillor Bell. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. As you heard, I'm one of the members on today's hearing. The other member present is Councillor Emma Pluvier. Could you give yourself a wave? Ms. Williams is our committee officer, as you've just heard, and Amanda Now is our legal advisor. The other parties I'm expecting is Gareth Hughes for the applicant. Do you want to? I can see Mr. Lovell. I don't know what your role is. You explain which part. You'll need to unmute. Mr. Lovell?
Hello, apologies for that. I'm the owner of Lovell Investments, the applicant.
Okay, and as you can see, Davy and Corinne, who are both other persons objecting to the application. I think that's everyone. The way we proceed in these hearings is that after these introductions, then it will be down to the applicant to make their case first. Then it will be down to any responsible authorities to respond, but they have withdrawn in this case. Then it will be the other person to make the case against the application if they wish to do so. At all those stages, only myself, Councillor Pluvier, can ask questions. We'll get to the discussion stage 6, where there can be some discussion between the parties. And then after final clarifications, we'll ask you to leave and we'll publish our decision as soon as we can. I would just say to Corinne and Davy, it's important to note that the applicant will claim this is a shadow licence. It will claim this is exactly the same terms and conditions as the existing licence. So in terms of what you want to present, you may want to think about that. They will say that it's not anything additional, but just the replication of the existing licence. Just think about how you want to put your remarks in that context. The other final thing I would say is if myself or Councillor Pluvier drop out of the meeting any stage due to technical difficulties, we will have to suspend it until we rejoin. With that, I think it's over to Suba. Sorry, there are no apologies for absence. We have minutes of a previous meeting. I was on that hearing. I'm content there, an accurate record. Councillor Pluvier, any declarations of interest? I've done the procedure, so it's on to Suba to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. Licensing Service received an application under Section 17 of the Licensing Act for a premises license for 14 Garden Walk as stated in the agenda. The applicant has mentioned that it's a shadow license with the same end conditions as in their existing license. All RAs have withdrawn their representation. Only other person representation remains. The applicant and C4 objector have provided some additional statement which has been circulated. And just for the clarification, there's a minor error in the report on page 43. So just for the clarification, the late night refreshment hours are only for Monday to Saturday. There's no Sunday hours for late night refreshment. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. I hope everyone can hear me. I hope you can hear me, Chairman.
We can, yeah.
Thank you very much for organising the committee in these difficult times. I'm grateful for the fact that we can organise it through this medium. And I thank the officers as well for working on this to get this hearing in front of you. You're quite right, Chairman. Actually, you pretty well summed up my case, actually, that is what I'm going to say. As you said in your opening remarks, I will say what this is not. This is not an application to extend the hours or increase the licensable activities already at the premises, or to increase the capacity or change any of the conditions. It's an application to put in place a license which is in exactly the same format as the license that currently exists. And you'll be aware, Chairman, in fact, even your last minutes, hopefully, that you've just agreed, have a similar case on in front of you as Chairman on that occasion. It's an application under Section 2.3, and as you know, the 2.3 allows for there to be more than one authorization, as many authorizations as one would like with respect to a particular premises. And this effectively is how the shadow licenses come into existence. So primarily, it's a protective measure, if you like, during what are currently very, very difficult times where many operators are sadly not surviving, indeed thousands of them at the moment not surviving and literally going out of business. Sadly, when those operators go out of business, the licenses tend to fall with them, or for one reason or another, they might surrender the license without the landlord even knowing, and it is then gone, and the landlord finds that his premises no longer benefits from a license. And I know the Chairman will be aware of similar arguments before him and his colleagues in the past. So that's essentially why this application is made during these difficult times by the landlord, Mr. Lovell, who's here with you. And so we're seeking merely to replicate, as you said, Chairman, in the opening remarks, every word, every dot and every cross T of the license as it currently exists. There is no objection in front of you today from any of the statutory authorities that you might normally expect to see. And Mr. Chewett from the licensing office, of course, who you would normally expect to see, particularly with regard to applications in the special policy area, which he's usually in attendance on, is not here either. As you'll be aware, he subsequently withdrew his representation when he discovered that this, in fact, was a shadow license. So for all those reasons, and that's the reason why Mr. Chewett is not here, this application, in our respectful submission, cannot contribute in any way to cumulative impact within the special policy area in Shoreditch. It will only ever become operational should one of those circumstances that I described at the beginning arise, which is liquidation of the operator or a sudden surrender of the license to the local authority, and it protects the landlord's interests. So it's seeking merely to reproduce everything that's in front of you, all the conditions, and in those circumstances, Chairman, I can be very short and invite the committee to grant this application for a shadow license. I don't think I can say much else, sir, in the circumstances, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you or colleagues may have.
Okay, Mr. Lovell, can you just repeat your interest in the premises?
I'm sorry, Chairman, I lost you.
Could I just have Mr. Lovell repeating the nature of his interest in the premises, just for clarity?
Yes, of course.
Yes, I've owned the Tramshed building for about 12 years, and so I'm a property owner. I did operate a consulting business in the property before it became a restaurant let to Hicks. So my interest is as owner of the building, and my only interest is in the situation that Gareth outlined if there is a default by the current operator. But I would have no intention personally of trading from that property. It's purely a protective measure. I have no business in the hospitality sector other than being a owner of property.
Okay, thank you. I wanted that to be absolutely clear. I'm not going to put any questions at this stage. Because do you have any questions? We'll come back to some matters on the discussion stage. So, Corinne, could I hear from you, please?
Yes, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much for this meeting, and I'm very grateful for the people at Hackney to make it possible for us. I live at 17 Charlotte Road. Our living spaces and bedrooms are situated directly opposite and above the glass roof of the tram shed. I also speak on behalf of other residents in the upper flat at 18 Charlotte Road who have their rooms above the tram shed roof. There are many other residential premises around Garden Walk, Rivington Street, Charlotte Road. One of our main concerns is about the escape of noise from the tram shed, particularly noise escaping from the roof. The tram shed is a listed building, and although it has secondary glazing installed under the original glazed roof, this is still insufficient soundproofing in case of music. Noise also escapes via the slate roof. This is acknowledged in the planning condition, which states that no music, live or otherwise, shall be played inside the premises in such a way as being audible within adjoining premises or at the boundary of nearby premises to protect the amenity of nearby residents. The applicant claims it is a shadow licensing application and the premises have worked well for many years with the same license. This is correct. It has mostly worked well under the previous management with Mark Hicks. It worked because the tram shed was operating as a restaurant and music was only used as low-level background noise for the restaurant and could not be heard by us. Mark Hicks was extremely conscious of nearby residents. There were only very few occasions in the early stages of the restaurant when music was played in the premises, and in these cases, it was incredibly stressful for us. It felt like it was in our own bedroom. Two of the past occasions that I referred to were on 9 of September 2012 and 13 of September 2013, and were exceptional events resulting from temporary event notices, with live music being played. It was a complete invasion of our space, denying us peaceful enjoyment of our premises. But Mark Hicks listened to residents' complaints, and thereafter music was used as restaurant low-level background music only, and there were no temporary events. I am extremely anxious to read in the press that the proposed activities by the new management are to include regular music events, thus basically making the tram shed a music venue as opposed to simply a restaurant. This would seem to be in contradiction to planning conditions. The current license states that there shall be no noise nuisance as determined by the council's noise pollution team to any premises location where residents reside when this premise is used for licensable activities. I cannot imagine a life where one would have to call the noise team regularly due to music events. This would be extremely stressful. The noise team is not always available and will not be available during the day or early evening when hearing music would also be a nuisance. This would put much additional burden and pressure on existing residents and be detrimental to our health. As you know, the most serious problem created by noise nuisance is the impact it has on health. It can trigger the body's stress response. This has been linked with heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, and a lower immune system. I'm extremely anxious at the prospect of having to go through the onus of calling the noise team regularly because I can hear music. Even if not played loudly, the fact that music could be heard often and regularly is sufficient in creating an incredibly stressful environment for residents because we cannot escape. In order to alleviate our concerns, I would like the following to be stipulated in the licensing condition. 1, that the licensing to specify that no temporary event notice be approved that would allow music and entertainment to be played in the premises. 2, given that the intention of the applicant of the operator is to have music events, and in order to prevent public nuisance, the license must specify that no music, live or otherwise, shall be played inside the premises in such a way as being audible within adjoining premises or at the boundary of nearby premises at any time to protect the amenity of nearby residents. That would refer to conditions N6, N7, and N8 of the current licensing policy. See your Appendix D pool of conditions. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Corinne. And Davy, your points, please.
Thank you, Councillor, for allowing me to speak today and organising this meeting. First of all, I would like to say that I live just opposite, well, next to the tram shed. My bedroom is literally 3 meters away from the entrance door of the tram shed. And I also represent 3 other residents at 40 Rivington Street. I understand that those residents have written to the council to oppose this application, but they cannot join today because of work commitments. So these people are Paul Glutz, Stuart Ball, and Josh Chesterfield, who are all residents on different floors at 40 Rivington Street. We are sharing a party wall with the tram shed, and we live in the building next door. So I would like to say that I share and we share Corinne's points, but I would like to add a few more points, if I may, and to go back to Mr. Gareth Hughes's points earlier, saying that this is just a shadow application of a license. This was granted 10 years ago. I would like to point out that when the license was granted 10 years ago, the landscape in the conservation area, the South Shoreditch Conservation Area, was very different. We only had 2 to 3 restaurants, 1 pub in the streets, and it was far less busy than it is today. Today, 10 years down the line, we have over 20 venues, which for most of them are open up until 10 p.m. or after 10 p.m. And this should be taken into consideration. And this is where we are talking about the cumulative impact of the noise, but also the passing trade. We have got a lot of people in the streets. These are very narrow streets, as you know, from the Shoreditch Triangle, which creates a lot of noise and a lot of activity. So those licenses, in my view, and this is how I understand it from the licensing guidance and guidelines provided by Hackney Council, should be reviewed and can be reviewed every 5 years or so. So this particular license, taken into context, should take into consideration the cumulative impact of all of those new venues that have been erected over the last 10 years. But also, if we are taking this license into the current context, one might as well look at the future context. We have got a brand new station opening up in Old Street. We have got an 18-story hotel, the Art Hotel, that has been built 60 yards away from the tram shed, or maybe 72 yards away from the tram shed, which will be opening in 2023 with 350 hotel bedrooms. On the other side of the road, we have got the Hoxton Hotel with another 300 bedrooms. There is a lot of people and a lot of passing trade. That hotel, the Art Hotel, will also have an entertainment venue and a bar and a restaurant on the top floor. And this is just one of the projects that has been granted a license. So looking at the cumulative impact once again, it is my understanding that the council can look at an application that was made, look at when it was made, the current context, and the future context. That's the first point about the cumulative impact. My second point is to say that because we share a party wall with the tram shed, we have, our building was built in the late 19th century, and we share the same structure or common structures with beams and brickwork. The sound from music travels, but not only music. We can hear people, and sometimes there were parties, and especially during the the Christmas parties. It's always busier, and we totally understand that. We are not difficult people. We understand that it is a difficult time for businesses, but also I understand. I was born in a restaurant. My father was a restaurateur, so I understand about noise when it comes to restaurants, and we try not to be too difficult. However, one has to say that in the current license, it was very, very clear that there shouldn't be more than 10 clients outside when now smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol and so on. I have to say it doesn't always happen, and I had to come down several times to talk to the people at the entrance of the tramshed, and they were very helpful. They said, okay, yes, we're going to do something about this. Now, I'm slightly concerned of the tramshed turning into a live entertainment venue or a music venue, or having plans to have more music being played, because this was always meant to be a restaurant, a sit-down restaurant, and not a transient place where people can just come to have drinks and then, you know, in a state of ebriety, come out on the streets and make a lot more noise. And then there's also this element of soundproofing when sound travels through the common structure that we have with the tramshed. No later than yesterday, 3 p.m., there was loud music being played at the tramshed. So Mr. Lovell may know who was in the tramshed at that point. I don't know, but we could hear it from our windows. And that was only just at 3 p.m. But it's not, you know, often at the moment, but I just want to say that we could hear it. So, and that was yesterday. If you now decide to have people like Mr. Kool-Lautix, who is involved with the tramshed, and it's called the Tramshed Project Limited. There's a couple of articles online available about this, with plans to organize food festivals, music festivals at the tramshed, or having asked for planning application to bring food and music on the streets, on Garden Walk and on Rivington Street. I think it's the beginning of an issue for us, because it shows that there are some ulterior motives where in order to attract this clientele and this passing trade, the tramshed is going to become a live entertainment, a live music and food venue. And we really want to protect this, because although we know that we are small fish, it's a bit like David against Goliath. We are residents, and we have chosen to live, and we've been living for some time in the Shoreditch Conservation Area because we love the neighborhood, and we also want to protect our quality of life. So for that reason, I would like to ask our councillors to consider the section N of the pool of conditions for noise and odor in the Hackney planning licensing documents at page 36, that states that we must control noise, we must avoid loud music or music disturbing residents and neighbors, and also think of the cumulative impact of having, you know, a lot of people coming from all of these hotels. We're talking in excess of 800 bedrooms in the vicinity of the tramshed, coming to have some live music and entertainment in late hours and then making more noise on the streets. Not talking about, you know, the foul and, you know, male urinating on our doors. It has happened 17 times last year. And then I'm not saying it's the tramshed's clients. Please bear with me, but this is what's happened. We cannot tell.
Towards the conclusion, please.
Excuse me?
Conclusion, please. Could you move towards concluding your remarks?
Okay. This is my conclusion. I would like to ensure that when the application is granted, some conditions are made so that there is no music, loud music and live entertainment, live music being played in the tramshed as a restaurant in its current form, because at the moment it does not have the soundproofing required so that we are not disturbed. And also in terms of the cumulative impact, I would like our councillors to review the opening hours that have been granted in the original license, because that license was granted over 10 years ago, and now the landscape has changed drastically.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for hearing me.
if we move to discussion phase, Corinne, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you immediately on one point. There's no way we can limit someone's ability to apply for temporary event notices by way of condition. I'm afraid they can apply for them, and all you can do is encourage police and environmental health to object when they're made.
We have actually had a condition where somebody voluntarily did put as a condition that they wouldn't, and that if they did, the license would cease to. I can't remember if it was actually Gareth Hughes who did that one. It was for the village, whatever it's called, underground.
Wasn't one of mine, Councillor Pluvier, but I understand what you mean. I think it has been done. I question the legality of it, given that the TENS regime is quite distinct legally from the licensing regime, and it wouldn't stop. Some people do deploy that condition, but it wouldn't stop others coming in applying for a 10 for the premises in any event who are not connected with the premises, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I know, I realise. I mean, it was very much tied to that individual applicant agreeing to it.
Yes, yeah.
I just, Chair, Story, to say something.
Yes.
I just meant 10 with the intent, a temporary event notice with the intent of playing music. That's what I meant.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't limit the ability to apply for those. You can only deal with them as they are applied for. Emma, Farah?
Can I ask for some clarification? I'm not clear, and the residents haven't been clear. So maybe from the owner or Gareth. Obviously, we're aware of it as a restaurant. How they could, when the hearings were originally made, and that it was a restaurateur, and we had some issues with the roof, and I remember those, and they were dealt with. I just wondered. It seems that it's not being run by that person now, and I wondered when the change had happened and what that change had been for how, basically for how long. So, yeah.
Mr. Lovell's left us.
Mr. Lovell, do you want to answer that?
I think he's left us.
I think, Chairman, I might be able to answer it anyway. That Mark Hicks, I mean, I did the original applications, you may recall, back in 2009-10, I think it was, where we did an operator's application, which is what this has been throughout, for Mark Hicks. And of course, Mark, as you may have read from the press, has fallen on hard times himself, which has brought an end to quite a number of his restaurants across the country, not just the Tramshed. As I understand it, the new operators in there, and of course they're subject to the existing premises license. So if it was felt necessary to take issue with anything going on there, there is the premises license that can be challenged. Mr. Lovell's back. That can be challenged, but maybe Mr. Lovell, who's just joined us, I don't know if you can hear me. I've just answered the issue about Mark Hicks moving out from the premises. Do you just want to deal with the current operator who's in there, John?
Yes, certainly. So Mark Hicks, the business came to an end around March this year. The building has been vacant since then. I have been looking for a longer term operator. Clearly it's very challenging to find long-term operators, and I have reached an agreement with the operator for a 12 months. So they just have a 12 months agreement to operate within the existing planning and within the existing licensing. I'm surprised. I think there may have been some confusion about what their operations are. It is true that the operator, Dominic Cools, does have other businesses which do street food and street entertainments. That is not what he will be doing at the Tramshed. If you look at the Tramshed projects, what they're actually doing during the day, you'll be able to rent a kind of table so to use for business meetings. So I would be surprised if there's anything in the way of loud music between sort of operating hours up until 6 p.m.
To this, may I interject? Chair. Is that acceptable to speak? Thank you very much, Mr. Lovell, for pointing this out. It's good to know that it's Mr. Cool-Artigues who is actually the new tenant for 12 months. As I pointed out earlier, there was music to knock on their door. However, it showed and explains why it seems as though the style has changed slightly in the last few months. And I'm very sorry you've lost such a great tenant, because Mark Hicks was very considerate as a restaurateur. The one thing I would like to say to our councillors is that Mr. Cool-Artigues, whom I don't know personally, has got his expertise and 20 years experience in the music industry, but not as a restaurateur. Therefore, it adds additional pressure and stress on us, because we don't know somebody who enters a venue like the Tramshed and who specializes in organizing festivals of food and music, who plays loud music and who's not known as a restaurateur, what's happening, what's going on.
Chair, can I say something?
Okay, go ahead.
Just very quickly, in the press, it is publicized that they will have regular music events as part of the new operation. So, and that was not the case at all with Mark Hicks. Mark Hicks was only playing music as a very low background noise for the restaurant, that's all. So it's a completely different way of operating under the same license. So this is why we're very anxious. It is a completely different proposal, and it's not, a license is not just for 12 months, it's for more than 12 months anyway. And that's why we are quite keen to have more restrictions regarding audibility of music in residential premises. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lovell, I presume you'll be happy to remind the new tenant that he must abide by the license conditions.
Of course, I'll be seeing, I expect to see them this evening, because I'll be dining in the restaurant. Just to clarify, their main intention is food, and they are going to have 3 different food concepts. So during the day, you can rent a table space to work from. My understanding is you pay something like £40, and that £40 you can then spend on food and drink. So effectively, you'd have your desk space for free during the day, and then in the evening it would be a conventional restaurant. So I went there last Thursday evening, and it was very much conventional, which was their first opening night, and it was very much conventional restaurant space. Going forwards, at the moment they've just got 1 menu. Going forwards, they will have 3 different menus. But I will certainly remind them that they need to operate within the constraints of the existing planning and the existing licensing.
On the existing license, condition number 12 is there shall be no noise nuisance to any premises, location, where residents reside when this premises is used for licensable activities.
Yes, and those conditions are replicated in the 12-month lease that they have signed.
So, Corinne, Davy are clear that condition would continue on and would be applicable to anybody who took on the license in that premises.
I understand that. I understand that very clear. However, it is planned regular music events, which is completely different proposition. That would be, you know, the fact that we would be, the onus would be on residents to call the noise patrol is extremely stressful when you have regular music events. It is not a way to...
on the applicant to make sure that any license is abided by and the terms of the license are abided by, and the complaints is a backup to that. Emma, do you want to come in?
Yes, I just wondered if the applicant, I mean, given the history of the building and the acceptance by Mark Hicks that music was impossible to have in this venue without disturbing the neighbours to quite a considerable degree, and that condition, that the trouble with that existing condition is that it uses the word noise nuisance, which does require the noise people to come down and measure and make us, blah blah blah. Whereas I just wondered if it would be acceptable on this license to have a condition that said no regulated entertainment or live music at the venue, which would be an agreement that because this venue is odd in the sense that it is extremely vulnerable to noise nuisance to neighbours, and that was accepted by Mark Hicks in the past. And as Corinne has said, to put applicants through having to go through that process when, in a sense, we know that if that happens, they'd have to go through this process. It's easier to put in a condition that says it's just not going to happen, end of, rather than say, oh, this is a restaurant, they're not going to have live music, accept a condition on the permanent shadow license which says we're not going to have live music at all. I understand that it may be on the planning, I don't know, but that no noise nuisance condition is actually does in a sense require, or could be interpreted as to require evidence of a noise nuisance before it was stopped. And it's clear to me that any loud music in that venue of any sort would be a noise nuisance because of the type of building that it is.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to get the applicant's views on what, and I understand that we can't condition the 12-month license, and that obviously, but we could put a condition on that in view of the history of the building.
Well, I would only say, Councillor Ruby, that I've talked with Ola, the Environmental Health Officer, throughout this process. He is happy with the condition as set out there. I think if he'd had a string of complaints about the premises over the years, and I'm grateful to hear that Mark operated it very well, then Ola would have been suggesting a tighter condition. But in terms of the noise nuisance, I mean, if he visits the premises when there is noise nuisance alleged noise nuisance, then he would have to determine whether it was a statutory noise nuisance, and he has the power to serve an Environmental Protection Act notice, which is far easier than anything under the license, on the existing license.
No, it requires, that's the very point I'm making, is that, I mean, that particular environmental health officer, I don't think has been in doesn't know the history of this, and we do. And we went through hearings we had to go through a process to limit the use with Mark because it was causing a nuisance to start with. And that is the nature of the premises. It is relatively unique because you cannot soundproof. It's a listed building with a glass roof, and it will also always cause a considerable nuisance to the immediate neighbours if there is music. And particularly, for example, under any license, you're allowed to have live music until 11 o'clock without a license for that. Now, it was clear with the previous owner that he recognised that was unacceptable in that building for those people. And I'm just asking you if you can acknowledge that in terms of conditions now on this shadow license.
Well, I'm very much in Mr. Lovell's hands on that, of course, and what he would suggest there. But as I say, we're not discussing the license that currently exists. There are powers to be able to deal with it. You're right about the live music point, but of course it always has to be subject to not causing a statutory noise nuisance anyway. And the officer can serve a notice if it is causing a nuisance.
Excuse me.
Can
Sorry, can we stop?
take a quick pause, please? Councillor Bell. Oh, who is back? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Mr. Hughes, could you resume? Could you start again, so that Councillor Bell hasn't missed anything, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think I was just simply saying there, in response to Councillor Clouvier's question, that we are dealing with the existing licence on the premises that they currently stand, and if there is a noise nuisance in there about which the neighbours have complained, then the Environmental Health Officer has the power and the authority to serve a notice under the Environmental Protection Act to ensure that the noise nuisance stops. And that is a pretty powerful tool that he has in his armory, which is nothing, of course, to do with licensing, but does have immediate effect in terms of the Environmental Protection Act and the notice. They have to abide by it straight away. And otherwise, there are criminal sanctions which run on from that.
A couple of other things I wanted to raise. The first one is, in my opinion, it's bad practice to have more than one license on a premises. We've had occasions in the past where a premises have been up for review and a second license has emerged. And the licensee has said, if you review my license, I'm going to have to run to this older one with less conditions, and we can get into complicated enforcement proceedings as well. So as a general principle, I prefer only one license per premises. However, we're aware there is some case law in the opposite direction, and we're aware of what it said.
Well, in most cases, I mean, I do many shadow licenses in Westminster for Grosvenor Estate and the like, and I think the view of Westminster City Council is that if they would never be in a position where they would need to review, then they will review both licenses.
Can I come, Chair?
No, not yet. The other thing is, we want to make specific what you said earlier in respect of the license not being used unless the other license is in some way not operable.
Gareth, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, look, I'm a property person. I'm not going to suddenly start going into the food and drinks business. But my only interest here is in terms of the building and making it easy to let the property in the event that it becomes vacant again.
Okay,
and I don't have a problem with that either, Chairman.
Good. Corinne?
Oh, there might be a review of the license which makes it operate as just one license. And that might be to limit the noise, or limit the sound, to have a limiting device on the sound so that even if music is played, it's not audible in nearby residential properties. That you know, is something that could be there permanently due to the nature of the building anyway.
A sound limiter would be possible if there was an objection on the grounds of the noise nuisance. If you were to bring a review, it could be possible at that stage to add a condition requiring a noise limiter. At this stage, unfortunately, there is no evidence of regular noise nuisance that would cause us to be able to impose a condition.
Because Mark Hicks was very good. He only played low background noise. But now it's going to become a music venue.
Well, the license doesn't allow for that.
It will have regular music events. That's what they are advertising.
Well,
Yes.
I said the current license does not allow for that.
But if they hold those events under the existing license, then it is reviewable.
The only unfortunate thing, as we discussed earlier, temporary event notices could be used to state events. And unless the police or environmental health object, then we cannot put controls on those. But we would like you to encourage the police and our own environmental health services to object whenever there is a 10, if the premises is causing you any problems.
Councillor Bell, if I may add and interject.
Yeah.
Each time personally, I've had to call the noise team maybe 5-6 times in the last 5 years. Every time I try to get hold of them, it's busy or there's an answer machine. And I know that some of my neighbors have the same issue. So to go back to the point of Corinne, when we know, and the other councillor, when we know that this building, the tram shed, cannot be soundproofed in the way that other venues might be soundproofed because of its listed features, couldn't it be possible for our team, councillors, today to add one of the clauses to the existing license so that no live music or music be played in the restaurants in this venue, rather than to have to deal with an issue and then have to call a team or through channels that are incredibly stressful and difficult to get to, and then we go into a battle, and then if the tenant only has 12 months, by the time there's representation, it's going to be a never-ending story. I'm sorry, I'm trying to express myself, but maybe I'm not being clear.
No, you're very clear. I understand exactly the point you're making.
You are very clear, but just to add to that, we are not talking about this 12-month license. We are talking about the shadow to it. So effectively, it would only come into play if that current operator left in the 12 months or something. So anyway, just clarifying that.
So the current main license applies to the person who's taken on the operation. My voice is starting to go, but the current main license applies to the person who's taken on the operation in succession to Mr. Higgs. And this would be a separate license which would only into action if that person went out of business effectively. So all the conditions that are currently on there stay on there, including the noise condition. I agree with points made. It is not worded as well as it could be. It would be better if it referred to noise rather than noise nuisance. But we'd have to have grounds for imposing strenuous new conditions. I'm not sure we have at the moment. Is there anything, Amanda, you think we need to bring up that we haven't?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Olivier, anything you want to ask? I think we're nearing a conclusion then. As I said at the start, unfortunately, this is a so-called shadow license. We are limited in what we can do in respect of those licenses. There would have to be substantial grounds to amend or reject them. And I'm not entirely sure we've heard such grounds, but you can have one last opportunity to try and make the case for that. So I'll invite people to make closing remarks. And I always take the same order as before. So if Mr. Hughes or Mr. Lovell could go first, make closing remarks.
So no, thank you. I'm grateful for allowing me another opportunity, but I think I've said all I need to say in my opening remarks, and my case is as it stands, unless Mr. Lovell wants to add anything.
I would just say I've been a responsible owner of this building for 12 years. When I first bought it, it was occupied by an asbestos removal company. There were very substantial residents' objections to Mark Hicks before he took the license. And I worked very carefully, closely with Mark, also with help at that time from Gareth. And I think I've demonstrated I've been a very responsible owner of this building for a long period of time. And in terms of the current owners, current users, they're only in there for 12 months. The restrictions announced today will decimate their potential business plan. And as a result of that, I feel I need in my property business to protect this license so that it still has an enduring benefit to be able to remarket the property in a year or two's time.
Okay, thank you. And we will record that you did agree to remind the applicants need to abide by the license conditions and any planning restrictions as well.
Correct.
Corinne.
So from what I've heard so far, I don't think my main objection has been heard in terms of the nature of the operation regarding music venue, and the stress that it will create even for 12 months on local residents. It's a completely new type of operation. It's no longer a main restaurant. And so my objections still stand.
Okay, thank you very much. Davey?
Thank you for the opportunity to present our objections. And because I'm speaking on behalf of 3 other people at 40 Rivington Street. And I hope the council can reconsider their position in terms of the cumulative impact and playing of music, may it be live or through a sound system, which travels through the beams and the structure of the building. We have been protected through the diligence of a very good tenant. I also understand the business reality, particularly from Mr. Lovell. It is in his interest to have a license which is as tolerant as possible so that he can relet his property, and we want his property to be relet by a very good tenant, like it has been the case with Mark Hicks for 10 years or so, and we wish him well with that. But in the meantime, I hope that the council can protect our livelihoods and our quality of life, because the Shoreditch Triangle is turning into a real nightmare.
Okay, thank you very much. Emma, any final clarifications? If not, I'll ask you to leave us at this stage. We endeavour to get these decisions out as soon as possible. There's a bit of a backlog, plus you've been aware that we had a cyber attack on the council in the last few days. That has made all of our IT systems slower, but as soon as possible we'll publish a decision. Go to calendar of meetings on the council website and look out for printed decisions. It's not very cryptic, so it'll appear there as soon as we can. If it doesn't appear quickly, please get in contact with Natalie and we'll try and email you a copy of the decision if the website doesn't work.
I think, Chair, from what I understood, there's a possibility that the decision would be available, but we'd have to send a link if the calendar doesn't come up before that. So we
yeah, if it doesn't appear within 5 days, get in contact with one of the officers and we'll get it to you in some form.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chairman. Hope your voice gets better.